So, here we go with chapter 29. General Pepe and the One Big Union. At the present moment, when we are surfeited with the words unions and mergers, to say nothing of cartels, a new interest is awakened by the perusal of Thomas Frost's book on secret societies, from which we extract the following. Two results of great importance in the progress of the European Revolution proceeded from the events that occurred at Naples in 1820-21. One was the reorganization of the Carbonari, consequent upon the publicity given to the system when it had brought about the revolution, and the secrecy in which it had hitherto been enveloped was no longer deemed necessary. The other was the extension of the system beyond the Alps. When the Neapolitan Revolution had been effected, the Carbonari emerged from their mystery, published their constitution and statutes, and ceased to conceal their patents and their cards of membership. In the Papal States, in Lombardy, and in Piedmont, the veil of secrecy was maintained for a little time longer, partly through the adoption of the Carbonari in those portions of the peninsula of symbols and passwords different from those of the Neapolitan lodges, partly by the formation of the various societies of the Adelphi, the Guelphs, the Brothers Protectors, and the Italian Federati, which were similar and yet not the same, though all holding the same principles and having a common object. But after the collapse of the Piedmontese Revolution, so much doubt and fear existed among the leaders as to the extent to which the secrets of the system were known, that they were all effaced and consigned to oblivion. The scattered directors of a movement drew together the broken threads of the conspiracy as soon as they were able, but with a new nomenclature and a new symbolism. The dispersion of the Carbonaro leaders had at the same time the effect of extending the system in France, where it had been introduced towards the end of 1820, and creating centers of revolutionary agitation in the foreign cities in which they temporarily located themselves. General Pepe proceeded to Barcelona when the counter-revolution was imminent at Naples, and his life no longer safe there, and to the same city went several of the Piedmontese revolutionists when their country was Austrianized after the same lawless fashion. Scalvini and Ugoni took refuge at Geneva. Others of the proscribed proceeded to London. This dispersion and the progress which Carbonarism was making in France suggested to General Pepe the idea of an international secret society, which should combine for a common purpose the advanced political reformers of all European states. Shortly after his arrival at Madrid, to which city he proceeded from Barcelona, he propounded He propounded 2 or 3 ultra-liberal deputies the plan of this society, the object of which, he says, was to enable the members to correspond and by these means preclude the possibility of a renewal of that want of union which had been experienced among the most noted patriots of Spain and Portugal, Naples and Piedmont. Several deputies of the Cortes were inclined to regard such an association as extremely beneficial to the public cause, more especially in their own peninsula, where a great want of concord existed between the Portuguese and the Spaniards. The society was accordingly founded. Several members of the Cortes formed part of it, as well as General Ballesteros, Councillor of State. I still preserve the regulations of this society, the great object of which was to open a communication between the most enlightened patriots of the different cities in Europe. It was decided that I should exert myself to give it extension in Lisbon, London, and Paris, and that in the event of my success, other members should proceed to propagate it over Italy and Germany. Having organized in Madrid the first circle of the Constitutional Society of of European Patriots, Pepe proceeded to Lisbon, where he was even more successful in his efforts than in the Spanish capital. Two of the ministers and several councillors of state and members of the Cortes signified their adhesion, and before Pepe left, a flourishing circle was formed, under the direction of Almeida Mores, the president of the Cortes. From Lisbon, the general proceeded by sea to London, where, as he says, he soon found that a secret society in England among men of mind is a thing quite out of the order of probability. He mentioned the society to a few, but met with no encouragement. The Duke of Sussex and Sir Robert Wilson read the statutes regulations of the society, but only as a matter of curiosity. This curiosity is doubtless responsible for the creation of what was later known as the International Committee of London. The particular Duke of Sussex here referred to was the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of England from 1813 to 1843, and this interview with the Italian revolutionary is of great significance, showing as it does the effort at this date to subvert English Freemasonry to the aims of the International. According to the system, which worked out later, English Freemasonry retained to all appearances its original autonomy. But to proceed with the statement of Frost, Pepe next opened the correspondence with Lafayette, who hailed the proposed international organization of the secret societies as a holy alliance opposed to that of despotism, and at once associated himself with it. He, with Manuel and Argenson, the triumvirate that was supposed to have directed the Associated Patriots of 1816, were earnestly engaged at that time in the reorganization of the Carbonari of France, upon a new system which promised more perfect impenetrability, and Buonarroti was similarly engaged at Geneva, with a view to renowned operations in Italy. It has been doubted whether Lafayette, Manuel, and Argenson, with others who were supposed to be the leaders of the Carbonari in France, were actually the chiefs of the society, and with regard to Manuel, at least the point is not susceptible of positive demonstration. There are in all countries men of superior station who, when a collision between the people and the government is impending, are aware of what is going on and hold themselves prepared to step to the front when the movement has advanced to a point at which they can do so with advantage to the cause and safety to themselves, but who take care not to commit themselves to it prematurely, or to allow any trace to exist of their connection with it. This has been thought by some to have been the real position of the individuals, whom others have asserted to have been the actual leaders of the Carbonari, as they had previously been held to be of the Associated Patriots. But though there is no absolute proof that there were the Grand Elect, there can be very little, if any, moral doubt upon the point. Oh, just a short break. I'm just gonna, I need to comment for a minute, because just to give you an idea how funny it is to read, connection is spelled with an X here. So it's like words that, it's written in the older English type. Well, it's not difficult to read, but it's just kind of different for me. Okay, I'll go on. The author of Secret Societies of the European Revolution writes the foregoing paragraph but fails to explain it. Who and what are the men he refers to? Such indeed are the political principles adopted by the leaders of Freemasonry. Therein lies its power. As soon as any political movement becomes inevitable, as soon as public pressure on an existing government becomes too strong, This sect, in the name of liberty, equality, and fraternity, takes the secret leadership of the opposing faction. Through the new government, which becomes the subservient tool of its capricious master, who at any moment may suppress its fledgling by creating and backing a new opposition, it holds not the balance of power, but all the power. There you have it. Thus, those who rule Freemasonry today rule the world. And Frost further adds, in 1831, the French government had not only proclaimed... Oh, I'm sorry. I have to do something. Okay. I'm sorry. In 1831, the French government had not only proclaimed a policy of non-intervention, but had expressly declared that France would not permit intervention on the part of any other power in the affairs of any nation in Europe. Lafayette was deceived by these professions and assured Mazzini, the agent of the Masonic Revolutionary Committee, that the Italians had nothing to fear. And that year, Masonry made an attempt to cast off the Austrian yoke in Italy by using France as its base of operations. Owing, however, to French non-cooperation, the revolution failed. A few days afterwards, Mazzini and Lenati arrived at Marseille and chartered a vessel, aboard which they put a couple of cannon and 1,200 muskets. They were joined by General Pepe, Count Grillanzoni, and the advocate of Mantovani, Dr. Franceschini, and Lieutenant Mori. But at the last moment, the prefect received a telegraphic order from Paris to prevent their embarkation and lay an embargo on the vessel. General Pepe evaded the vigilance of the police, however, and contrived to reach Hères, where he heard of the entrance of the Austrians into Bologna, and thereupon abandoned his intention of giving the aid of his reputation and experience to the revolutionary cause. In connection with the agitation provoked in Piedmont during the reign of Charles Albert by Mazzini's Young Italy movement in 1848, the veteran General Pepe again comes into prominence. On March 29, 1848, he arrived at Naples and was sent for by King Ferdinand, who invited him to form a ministry of which he should have the presidency. With the ministries of war and marine, every difficulty, however, was thrown in the way of Pepe's projected military operations. The Naval Department insisted that the fleet could not convey troops, the king interposing various delays and the Pope refusing permission for more than one battalion or squadron to pass daily. 17,000 troops at last started, but with orders not to cross the Po until the king commanded the passage. There was much marching and counter-marching, but the secret societies had not yet won. The tangled history of the Young Italy movement in its early stages is well explained by Thomas Frost in The Secret Societies of the European Revolution, and anyone particularly interested in that phase of political history would do well to refer to this book. Due allowance must, however, be made for certain omissions and inaccurate deductions on the part of the author who, in 1876, could not have access to information which is now available to anyone seeking it. Chapter 30. Albert Pike and Guiseppe Mazzini. This chapter is compiled largely of extracts, some transcribed verbatim and others elaborated to include information necessary to the reader, from Adriano Lemmi, Marconieri Pratique, Initiation Human and Solar, De Diable, 14, in the year 14. Adriano Lemmi wrote, the anniversary of September 20... Oh, let me stop for a second. I definitely have to learn French. I'm sorry about that. Adriano Lemmi wrote, the anniversary of September 20th, the day on which Rome became the capital of Italy, when the temporal power of the Pope was overthrown, concerns Freemasonry exclusively. It is an anniversary, a purely Masonic festival, which marks the date of the arrival of Italian Freemasonry in Rome, the aim for which it had for many years been striving. The date of September 20th, 1870 is not only an Italian date, it is above all a great Masonic date, for it marks the organization of a supreme rite introduced into Freemasonry to lend a satanic character to the vague divinity more or less well known by the name of the great architect of the universe. During the last years preceding the capture of Rome, Mazzini had established relations with the Masonic chief of Scottish Rites, Albert Pike, president of the Supreme Council of Charleston, United States. Pike was a great student of the Kabbalah and the occult. Mazzini had understood that Freemasonry was a powerful lever with which to revolutionize the world, but he saw it divided into numerous rites, often rivals and even hostile to one another. Aspiring to Italian unity as a means of breaking the temporal power of the Holy See, he dreamt of a union of Masonry throughout the world to destroy the Church itself as a spiritual power. He addressed himself to Pike in preference to another Grand Orient or Supreme Council chief because of the many international ramifications of ancient and accepted Scottish rites, as Pike, its recognized chief, had succeeded in gaining considerable influence over all the supreme national councils of this rite, which had hitherto been of a purely dogmatic and liturgic character. Mazzini, who was very practical, said that it would be inadvisable to favor one rite only to the exclusion of all the others. In a letter to Albert Pike, dated January 22, 1870, he writes, "We must allow all the federations to continue just as they are, with their systems, their central authorities, and their diverse modes of correspondence between high grades of the same rite, organized as they are at present, but we must create a supreme rite, which will remain unknown, to which we will call those Masons of high degree whom we shall select. With regard to their brothers in Masonry, these men must be pledged to the strictest secrecy. Through this supreme rite, we will govern all Freemasonry, which will become the one international center, the more powerful because its direction will be unknown." Thus, at the same time, when Mazzini formed the scheme of unifying Freemasonry by creating one central universal direction reserved to a small number of high Masons chosen with the greatest care, he selected Albert Pike as an ally. Pike was born in Boston on December 29, 1809. His parents, in modest circumstances, succeeded in giving him a course at Harvard College. He then went to enjoy... Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to start over. His parents, in modest circumstances, succeeded in giving him a course at Harvard College. He then went to join his family at Newburyport. There for a while he taught in a primary school till he moved to Fairhaven, where he continued his career of pedagogue. In 1833, he went to Little Rock. From 1830 to 1840, Masonry in the United States had fallen into disrepute and almost ceased to exist. After the torture and death of William Morgan in 1826, many lodges faded into oblivion to resuscitate only after the storm of public censure had abated. During the Civil War, Pike served as a brigadier general in the Confederate Army. The Confederate government named him Indian Commissioner and charged him with the conduct of negotiations with the most powerful savage tribes to raise an army of their warriors. To facilitate his organization of this army, he was made governor of Indian Territory, and once these hordes were united, they were placed under his command. What followed can be easily understood, as his troops were composed of Chickasaws, Comanches, Creeks, Cherokees, Miamis, Osages, Kansas, and Cochise. with all of whom he personally was on the best of terms. Among them, he was known as the faithful paleface friend and protector. It was no longer war. It was an orgy of murder and atrocities so terrible that the foreign powers interfered. Representations made by England threatening intervention in the name of humanity finally compelled Jefferson Davis to disband his auxiliary Indian troops. Mrs. Liliana Pike, Room, gives us the following chronological history of her father's early Masonic career. She says that he became an odd fellow sometime in the 40s, and in 1850 entered the Masonic fraternity. After that, he gradually ceased to be active as an odd fellow. Soon becoming prominent in Masonry, he advanced rapidly to the highest honors. His Masonic record is as follows. He was initiated in Western Star Lodge at Little Rock in Arkansas in 1850. Raised to the degree of Worshipful Master in Western Star Lodge No. 1, Little Rock, Arkansas in July 1850. He became charter member of Magnolia Lodge No. 60, Little Rock, Arkansas, and was Worshipful Master ad vitam of that lodge in 1853. Exalted in Union Chapter No. 2, R.A.M., Little Rock, Arkansas in 1850. Greeted as Royal and Select Master at Washington, D.C. in 1852. Created Knight Templar, 1858, Washington Commandery No. 1, K.T. in Washington. Knight Templar. Elected Grand High Priest of the Grand Chapter of Arkansas in 1853. In 1856, met Brother Theodore S. Parvin of Connecticut and received degrees of Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite from 4 degrees to 32 degrees inclusive on March 20th, 1853. Coronated Honorary Inspector General April 25th, 1857. Crowned active member of Supreme Council, Southern Jurisdiction, March 20th, 1858 at Charleston, South Carolina, and on the resignation of Brother John, honor as Grand Commander was elected MP, Sovereign Grand Commander of the Supreme Council for the Southern Jurisdiction of the United States, January 2nd, 1859. Mrs. Room further adds, I will state here that he told me himself that Sovereign Grand Commander honor. His predecessor resigned that office expressly that he might be elected Sovereign Grand Commander. The Secretary of the Supreme Council at Charleston at this time, and its ruling power was Pike's great friend, Gallatin Mackey. On the other hand, Margiata gives the following particulars. Towards this epoch, Pike and Mackey received the visit of Longfellow. This Longfellow was a Scottish Rites Mason who, in 1837, had taken up his residence in the United States, becoming the intimate friend and private secretary of Moses Holbrook, then Sovereign Commander of the Supreme Council of Charleston. The intimacy between Longfellow and Holbrook became quickly serious, as both had thoroughly studied the occult sciences and enjoyed discussing the mysteries of the Kabbalah. One moment. When Longfellow asked his Grand Master's permission to join the Order of the Odd Fellows for the purpose of studying its organization, his request was granted. Oddfellow is the name adopted by the members of a society founded in London towards 1788. Their meeting places were called lodges, as in Masonry, and many were dissolved under the suspicion that their character was subversive, though the visible aims of the fraternity were simply mutual help and diversion. But the society, changing its location and its name, continued a precarious existence till in 1809 several members founded a new lodge at Manchester. Then some of them separated in 1813 and formed the Independent Order of Oddfellows, IOOF, the members of the General Council of which were all to reside at Manchester. The order was introduced in America in 1819 by the blacksmith Thomas Waldie, who founded Washington Lodge No. 1 at Baltimore. This town became the headquarters of the American and Canadian Oddfellows, and thanks to the energy of Wildee, the order made great headway and spread with rapidity. Longfellow and Holbrook, while exchanging views on the Kabbalah, had formed the project of creating a satanic rite in which the adepts would be instructed in black magic. But Holbrook, the Grand Master of the Supreme Council of Charleston, who had already composed a suitable ritual and sacrilegious mass called Adonicide Mass, died, retarding the fulfillment of the project. He was succeeded by John Honor, after whose death the dream of the Jew Moses Holbrook to subvert Masonry was fulfilled by Albert Pike on a gigantic scale. Longfellow left Charleston after the death of his patron, and 1854 went to Hamilton, Canada. There, with the authorization of Wildee, he submitted the rituals of Holbrook to this flourishing society, and it was decided to graft a second and separate class of adepts practicing secret Satanism onto the original body. But Wildee, becoming suddenly jealous, refused the use of his premises. Undiscouraged by the obstacles placed in his way by Wildee, Longfellow returned to Charleston in 1857, where he had interviews with Pike and Mackey, to whom he revealed his plan. The innovation of Longfellow was declared to be marvelous, but Pike, who had himself already thought of introducing Luciferianism into the inner shrines of the Scottish Rites, Freemasonry, would not take a definite stand, so Longfellow addressed himself directly to the Grand Master John Honor. He seemed indifferent to the subject on the grounds that one could not introduce Satanism into the Supreme Council of Scottish Rites without knowledge of his lieutenant commander, Charles Furman, who was opposed to changes of this kind. Finally, Longfellow obtained from Wildee the authorization secretly to use the Order of the Oddfellows for the initiations of the second class, which was to form an absolutely secret rite and to have its center at Hamilton. The adepts of the second-class Oddfellows practicing Satanism then took the name of Re-Theurgist Optimates, used by the Palladists also, and Longfellow became the grand priest of the new evocative magic. As a consequence of the intrigues and maneuvers of some members of the Masonic organization, the office of Grand Master had become an elective position, which was now destined to be filled by the particular member of the fraternity selected by the conspirators. Among these was Gallatin Mackey, a Luciferian, who proposed Albert Pike, another Luciferian, for the post of Grand Master of the Supreme Council of Charleston, to which he was duly elected on January 6, 1859, his candidacy being unopposed. Margiotta adds, Once Grand Master Pike reestablished the supremacy of his Supreme Council and succeeded gradually in becoming an important Masonic personage and the real chief of the Scottish Rites. In 1806, a jeweler, Joseph Corneau, founded a rival rite in New York composed of the same 33 degrees of initiation as the order of which he himself was chief. This rite, which was later worked by F. Fulhus, an American, excited the ire of the sovereign pontiff of universal Freemasonry, who waged a ceaseless warfare of excommunication against it. From letters scattered through different Masonic archives, it is evident that Mazzini formed his great project after 1866. The Grand Patriarch of the sect in Europe, Lord Palmerston, had died. Convinced that the power he had wielded was purely the result of personal influence with the different chiefs, and that not being based on an efficient organization, it was unlikely to endure, Mazzini set himself to study the problem of the international organization of Freemasonry, and in 1870 reached an agreement with Pike for the creation of the Supreme Rite. The Franco-Prussian War, which enabled the King of Piedmont, already called King of Italy, to take Rome, favored the abolition of the temporal power of the Pope, and at this time the Constitution of Central High Masonry was decreed and signed between Albert Pike and Guiseppe Mazzini. The act of creation is dated September 20th, 1870, the day upon which the army of invasion, commanded by the Freemason General Cadorna, entered the Eternal City. The two founders divided their powers according to the following plan. To Pike was given dogmatic authority and the title of Sovereign Pontiff of Universal Freemasonry, while Mazzini held the executive authority with the title of Sovereign Chief of Political Action. Mazzini evinced great deference towards the views of the Patriarch of Charleston and begged him to draw up the statutes of the grades of the Supreme Secret Rite, which could thus be liturgic bonds of the members of centralized high masonry. Albert Pike, in honor of his Templar Baphomet, which was in the keeping of his first and historic Supreme Council, named the order the New and Reformed Palladian Rite, or the New and Reformed Palladium. It was agreed, continues Margiotta, that the existence of this rite would be kept strictly secret, and that no mention of it would ever be made in the assemblies of the lodges and inner shrines of other rites, even when by accident the meeting might happen to be composed exclusively of brothers having the perfect initiation, for the secret of the new institution was only to be divulged with the greatest caution. Chosen few belonging to the ordinary high grades. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed something. With the greatest caution to a chosen few belonging to the ordinary high grades. To recruit adepts, they planned to use some members of the other rites, but in the beginning they meant to rely principally on those among the initiates of ancient and accepted Scottish rites who were already addicted to occultism. Everyone knows that in Masonry, from the degree of master, a Mason may, without being a member of a lodge, assist at sessions as a visitor, at lodges not belonging to his own rite or even to his own national federation, provided he is a regular active Mason and presents himself at a lodge working at a degree equal to or below the highest degree of which he is possessed. Thus a Rose Craw, 18th degree Scottish rites, traveling in any country may, if he frequents assiduously his lodge and chapter, present himself at any lodge of a degree equal to or inferior to his own, and assist at a seance, but he cannot enter an aeropagus of Knights Kadosh, 30th degree, even one of his own rite. A 33rd would be well received everywhere in any country, in any rite the existence of which is acknowledged. Thus it was particularly the initiates of the 33rd degrees Scottish rites who, owing to their extensive international ramifications, were privileged to recruit adepts for Palladism. That is why the Supreme Rite created its triangles, the name given to Palladian lodges, by degrees. But these were established on a firm base, the lowliest of its initiates being brothers long tested in ordinary masonry. Oh, I have to take a drink. One will better understand these precautions, knowing that Palladism is essentially a Luciferian rite. Its religion is Manichaean neo-Gnosticism, teaching that the divinity is dual and that Lucifer is the equal of Adonai, with Lucifer, the god of light and the goodness, struggling for humanity against Adonai, the god of darkness and evil. In stating this principle of the secret cult of the triangles, Albert Pike had only specified and unveiled the dogmas of the high grades of all other masonries. For in no matter what rite, the great architect of the universe is not the God worshipped by the Christians. For other reasons, these precautions were still necessary, in order to render possible the exercise of a supreme central directing power, reaching all the rites through the personal influence of the elects and perfect initiates, these being invested with privileges and giving the impulse which emanated from the source of the highest universal authority. If brothers not fully initiated had suspected the existence of this supreme organization, it is evident that in the ordinary lodges there would always have been a tendency to resist the motions of such privileged persons. To ensure the creation and good working of his formidable machine of palladism, Mazzini had reserved for himself the office of chief of political action, nor had he hesitated in bowing to the will of the Patriarch of Charleston, who, by his preponderance in Scottish rights, could easily penetrate all countries of the globe with the new institution. That this is the reason for Mazzini giving supremacy to the dogmatic over the political authority in international Freemasonry. The holy see of the dogma for the whole Masonic world was set up at Charleston, the sacred city of the Paladin. Pike, the sovereign pontiff of Lucifer, was the president of the Supreme Dogmatic Directory, composed of 10 brothers of the highest grades who formed his Supreme Grand College of Emeritus Masons. The Sovereign Executive Directory of High Masonry was established at Rome under Mazzini himself, who, knowing the rivalry between the different Supreme Councils in Italy, seldom appeared at the official meetings of the Grand Orient of Rome, and so as not to awaken suspicion in the minds of ordinary high-grade Italian Masons, in whom he had not confided the secret of the new institution, pretended to be occupied with socialism only. There's something written wrong here. What was this interest, plan, or pretense? In the following paragraph on the International in World Revolution by N. Webster, page 179, we find a link, if not the link, between Mazzini and Karl Marx. Mazzini and his international Masons are already preparing the subversion of the socialist labor movement. At the meeting in St. Martin's Hall on September 28, 1864, when the International was definitely founded, Marx played no part at all. I was present, he wrote Engels, only as a dumb personage on the platform. But he was named nevertheless a member of the subcommittee, the other members being Mazzini's secretary, a Polish Jew named Wolf, Le Lubez, a French Freemason, Kramer, the secretary of the English Masons Union, and Weston, the Owenite. At the first meeting of this committee, Wolf placed before it the statues of Mazzini's Working Men's Association, proposing them as the basis of the new association. Le Lubez suggested amendments described by Marx as perfectly childish. I was firmly resolved, he wrote, not to leave a single line, if possible, of all their balderdash. In a few weeks he had succeeded in establishing his authority. My propositions were all accepted by the commission. As to whether Marx thus maneuvered himself into a dominant position in the movement, or Mazzini's agents maneuvered Marx into this position to suit their own ends, is left to our imagination. But the fact of someone, not an outstanding personality, being elected or nominated on a committee for no particular reason, generally means to anyone versed in the technique of political tricks that the nomination or election was something arranged behind the scenes. Let me check 1 second to see how many more pages we got in this chapter. Oh, it's too long. No, I lost my... Okay, I'm going to break off. I'm going to break off here and continue next time.